Hidden within the sands of ancient Egypt lies a mystical guidebook to the afterlife, the Book of the Dead. Far from a single book, it's a collection of spells, rituals, and incantations designed to help souls navigate the perilous journey through the underworld. From the weighing of the heart to encounters with gods and monsters, this sacred text reveals a fascinating glimpse into Egyptian beliefs about death, judgment, and immortality. In this video, we'll uncover the secrets of the Book of the Dead, exploring its origins, meanings, and the mysterious world it was meant to guide the dead through. The Book of the Dead, Ancient Egypt's Guide to the Underworld. The ancient Egyptians possessed one of the most fascinating belief systems in human history. Their views on life, death, and the afterlife were deeply interconnected, reflected in everything from monumental architecture like the pyramids to intricate funerary texts. Among these texts, none is more renowned or enduring than the Book of the Dead, a spiritual guidebook designed to help the deceased navigate the perilous journey through the underworld and achieve eternal life. This text not only provides insight into ancient Egyptian religion, but also reveals the complexity of their society, theology, and views on morality. This article explores the Book of the Dead in detail, its origins, purpose, content, and cultural importance. In doing so, we will gain a deeper appreciation for the role it played in Egyptian funerary practices and how it shaped one of the ancient world's most enduring spiritual traditions. What is the Book of the Dead? Contrary to its ominous-sounding name, the Book of the Dead is not a single book in the modern sense. Rather, it is a collection of spells, prayers, incantations, and illustrations compiled over centuries. The purpose of these texts was to aid the dead in their passage through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, and to ensure their rebirth into the afterlife. In ancient Egyptian, the collection was known as RWNWPRT, MHRW, meaning Book of Coming Forth by Day. This title reflects the Egyptian belief that, through the proper rituals and knowledge, the dead could emerge from the darkness of death and rejoin the light, essentially, to live again. Origins and evolution. The origins of the Book of the Dead trace back to the Old Kingdom, circa 2600 BCE, with the pyramid texts, which were inscribed on the walls of royal tombs. These early texts were reserved for pharaohs and elites, and laid out spells for protection and resurrection. During the Middle Kingdom, circa 2055 to 1650 BCE, the coffin texts emerged. These were written on coffins and were accessible to nobles and upper-class individuals. They introduced more spells and democratized access to the afterlife by allowing non-royals to use them. By the New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, these writings evolved into the Book of the Dead, written on papyrus scrolls and placed in tombs with the deceased. This period marked the peak of the text's use. Over 200 known chapters or spells were used, though no single version of the Book of the Dead contained all of them. Each version was customized to suit the needs, status, and wealth of the individual. Structure and content. The Book of the Dead was not a fixed or canonical text. Scribes often selected spells based on what they deemed necessary or what the deceased could afford. That said, several key themes and sections consistently appeared across various versions. 1. Introduction and preparations for death. Many versions began with spells intended to prepare the soul for death and entry into the underworld. These included invocations to gods, statements of purity, and declarations of the deceased's moral character. For example, Spell 1 reads, "Here begin the spells of coming forth by day, and the praises and recitations for going into and coming out of the underworld." These early spells reflected a hopeful tone, affirming that death was not an end, but a transition. 2. Journey through the Duat. The underworld, or Duat, was a mysterious realm filled with dangers, trials, and gates guarded by strange and often terrifying deities. The dead had to pass through this labyrinthine world, guided by spells that provided passwords, protective charms, and maps. Some spells served as magical keys to gates, while others warded off monsters or serpents. For example, Spell 31 was designed to prevent the soul's heart from being stolen by demons. illustrations often accompanied these texts, showing elaborate maps of the underworld, including rivers of fire, gods with animal heads, and magical boats. 3. The Judgment of the Dead. One of the most iconic scenes from the Book of the Dead is the weighing of the heart ceremony. Central to Egyptian theology was the concept of Ma'at, the cosmic order, truth, and justice. Upon death, the heart of the deceased was weighed against the feather of Ma'at. If the heart was lighter or equal in weight, the soul was judged pure and allowed to enter paradise. If heavier, laden with sin, it was devoured by Ammit, a monstrous deity part lion, hippo, and crocodile, resulting in spiritual annihilation. Spell 125 is most associated with this judgment. In it, the deceased recites the negative confession, a series of statements asserting moral innocence. I have not committed sin. I have not stolen. I have not murdered. I have not lied. This reflects not only theological beliefs, but also a moral code central to Egyptian society. 4. Achieving eternal life. For those who passed the tests, the final spells helped the deceased achieve a blessed afterlife. They entered the field of reeds, an idealized version of Egypt where they could live in peace, harvest crops, reunite with loved ones, and dwell among the gods. These spells included rituals for breathing, eating, and avoiding the second death. They also ensured that the soul could transform into different forms, like birds or lotuses, and move freely between worlds. Religious and cultural significance. The Book of the Dead was not merely a funerary manual. It reflected a deeply spiritual worldview. In the Egyptian mind, death was not an abrupt cessation, but a continuation of life in another form. The body had to be preserved, hence mummification, and the soul equipped with sacred texts to survive the challenges of the afterlife. This belief system permeated Egyptian culture. Tombs were constructed not as graves, but as eternal homes. Amulets, scarabs, and sacred statues were included alongside copies of the Book of the Dead, reinforcing the spell's effectiveness. The texts also provided a moral compass. Through the negative confession and judgment rituals, Egyptians internalized ethical values. Their society valued truth, justice, humility, and kindness, qualities seen as essential for eternal life. Accessibility and personalization. What makes the Book of the Dead remarkable is its personalization. Unlike earlier royal exclusive texts by the New Kingdom, even commoners with sufficient means could commission their own versions. Wealthy individuals often hired scribes and artists to create lavish scrolls tailored with their names, likenesses, and specific wishes for the afterlife. Some papyri extended up to 100 feet in length. Others were brief, but all served the same fundamental purpose: to guide, protect, and empower the soul in death. The scrolls were buried with a mummified body, often rolled up and placed near or under the head or hands. The belief was that, upon awakening in the afterlife, the soul could read or absorb the spells to begin the journey. Rediscovery and modern understanding. The Book of the Dead captivated modern scholars after the discovery of numerous papyri in tombs during the 19th century. One of the most famous is the Papyrus of Ani, now housed in the British Museum. Dated to around 1250 BCE, it includes some of the most exquisite illustrations and is often used as the definitive version in translations. Translations by Egyptologists like E. A. Wallace Budge popularized the text in the West, though modern scholars now offer more accurate and culturally sensitive renditions. Today, the Book of the Dead is studied not just for its religious value, but for its contributions to our understanding of ancient Egyptian language, art, philosophy, and sociology. Legacy and influence. The Book of the Dead influenced not only later Egyptian religious texts like the books of Caverns and Amjuat, but also the general concept of life after death in surrounding cultures. The idea of judgment after death, moral accountability, and the journey of the soul became common themes in Greco-Roman, Christian, and Islamic theology. While these cultures interpreted the afterlife differently, echoes of the Egyptian belief in an ordered, morally structured hereafter resonate through time. In popular culture, the Book of the Dead continues to inspire everything from movies and video games to literature and occult mythology. While often dramatized or misrepresented, its core message, that life continues beyond death and that moral living has eternal consequences, remains powerfully human. The Book of the Dead is more than a funerary scroll. It is a mirror reflecting the ancient Egyptian soul. It offers a blueprint not just for death, but for how to live in harmony with divine order. Through its spells and symbols, it teaches that the path to eternity lies through purity of heart, knowledge of the divine, and courage in the face of cosmic trials. In many ways, the Book of the Dead continues to speak to us today. It reminds us that in seeking to understand death, we learn more about what it means to truly live. For the ancient Egyptians, this guide was not simply a way to survive the underworld. It was a promise that life, in all its beauty and struggle, had meaning beyond the grave. The Judgment of the Dead, ancient Egypt's final trial. In the grand architecture of ancient Egyptian religion, few events were as critical, symbolic, and morally loaded as the Judgment of the Dead. Known widely through vivid depictions and detailed spells in the Book of the Dead, this event was the moment when the deceased faced divine assessment. It was not enough for a person to be wealthy or honored in life. To attain eternal peace in the afterlife, they had to prove their moral worthiness in death. The Judgment of the Dead served as the ultimate reckoning, a cosmic tribunal where the soul's entire earthly life was weighed against the principles of Ma'at, the divine embodiment of truth, balance, and justice. This judgment was not just religious ritual. It shaped how Egyptians lived, governed, and saw the world. In this article, we will explore the mythological background, theological structure, symbolism, and cultural significance of the Judgment of the Dead, showing how it functioned as both a spiritual ordeal and a moral compass for ancient Egyptian civilization. Foundations of Egyptian theology, Ma'at and the afterlife. To understand the Judgment of the Dead, one must first understand the importance of Ma'at. In Egyptian thought, Ma'at represented not only truth and morality, but also the natural and cosmic order. She was both a concept and a goddess, depicted with an ostrich feather on her head, the very same feather used during the weighing of the heart. Ma'at governed all aspects of life, from the Nile's flooding to fair governance, from interpersonal justice to cosmic harmony. To defy Ma'at was to invite chaos isfit, both in life and in the afterlife. Thus, upholding Ma'at became a sacred duty, and the Judgment of the Dead was where the final test of this commitment played out. The journey to judgment. After death, the soul, B.A., did not immediately attain paradise. The journey to the afterlife was perilous and involved traversing the Duat, the Egyptian underworld filled with hostile spirits, demons, and treacherous obstacles. To survive this journey, the deceased relied on magical spells, prayers, and rituals, many of which were recorded in the Book of the Dead. Eventually, the soul arrived at the Hall of Two Truths, Ma'at, the divine courtroom where the final judgment took place. This was the site of the weighing of the heart, the climax of the soul's journey, and the determining moment of its eternal fate. The Hall of Two Truths, the divine courtroom. In the Hall of Two Truths, the deceased stood before a divine tribunal. This courtroom was presided over by Osiris, the god of the dead, resurrection, and the afterlife. Osiris, seated on his throne, acted as the chief judge. Around him stood a pantheon of 42 deities, each representing one of the nomes, provinces, of Egypt and each responsible for evaluating a specific moral principle. Other key figures in the court included Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification, who guided the soul and performed the heart weighing. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe god of wisdom, who recorded the results of the judgment. Ma'at, both symbolically and literally present, whose feather served as the standard of truth. This trial was both ceremonial and symbolic, meant to display the soul's alignment with moral and divine law. The weighing of the heart. At the heart of the trial was the ritual of weighing the deceased's heart against the feather of Marat. The heart, IB, was considered the seat of emotion, thought, and moral character in Egyptian belief. Unlike modern conceptions that place memory or conscience in the brain, the Egyptians believed the heart held the record of a person's life. The scales were held by Anubis. On one side was the feather of Marat, on the other, the heart of the deceased. Thoth stood nearby to inscribe the outcome. If the heart was lighter or equal in weight to the feather, it indicated a life lived in harmony with Marat. The soul was then declared Masakeru, true of voice or justified, and granted entry into the afterlife. However, if the heart was heavier, laden with guilt, lies, or sin, it was cast to the monstrous creature Ammit, the devourer of the dead. Ammit had the head of a crocodile, the front legs of a lion, and the back legs of a hippopotamus, the three most feared predators in Egypt. She would consume the heart, and the soul would suffer a second death, being annihilated and denied eternal life. The negative confession. One of the most profound elements of the judgment was the negative confession, found in spell 125 of the Book of the Dead. Rather than listing good deeds, the deceased would proclaim innocence of specific transgressions in front of the 42 judges. Examples of statements include, "I have not stolen. I have not killed men or women. I have not uttered lies. I have not caused pain. I have not defiled the wife of Amun." Each of these was directed to a particular deity and represented an area of moral scrutiny. The negative confession functioned both as a spiritual defense and a societal code, mirroring a list of ethical commandments. It reinforced the idea that moral behavior during life had eternal consequences. Outcome of the judgment. 1. Successful judgment. If the judgment was favorable, the soul passed into the field of reeds, Aru, a lush, idyllic version of Egypt's Nile Valley. There, the justified soul could live eternally in peace, with access to food, loved ones, and even the gods themselves. Some depictions show the soul farming crops, enjoying leisure, and receiving the blessings of Osiris. They could also transform into various forms, birds, lotuses, or divine beings, thanks to further spells from the Book of the Dead. This form of immortality was joyous, abundant, and free of earthly suffering. 2. Failed judgment. If the soul failed, its heart was devoured by Ammit, and it ceased to exist. There was no hell or eternal torment in Egyptian theology, only the terror of non-existence. This fate was feared above all, as it meant complete disconnection from the cycle of rebirth and the divine order. This outcome placed immense pressure on the living to maintain moral conduct and ensure proper burial rites, mummification, and funerary preparations. Symbolism and artistry. The judgment of the dead has been one of the most frequently illustrated themes in Egyptian tomb art and scrolls. The iconic scene of Anubis weighing the heart while Thoth records and Ammit waits has appeared on walls, coffins, papyri, and amulets for over a millennium. Key symbolic elements include scales, balance, justice, and objectivity. Heart, the essence of selfhood. Feather of Marat, the divine benchmark of righteousness. Thoth's writing tools, the record of eternal truth. Ammit, the consequence of evil, final and total. These symbols communicated complex theological ideas in simple, visually arresting ways that could be understood by both literate elites and commoners. Moral and social implications. The judgment of the dead functioned as more than myth. It was an ethical framework that shaped Egyptian society. The idea that all people, regardless of class, would be judged by the same moral standard created a kind of cosmic egalitarianism. Pharaohs, peasants, artisans, and scribes alike faced the same trial. This reinforced the centrality of Maat in daily life, not only in the religious or legal spheres but in social conduct. Living truthfully, fairly, and kindly was not just noble, it was necessary for salvation. Additionally, the detailed judgment process suggests an early form of what we might now call conscience or moral self-awareness. Egyptians believed that the heart would testify for or against its owner, and so a person must live honorably, lest they betray themselves in death. Comparison to other religious traditions. While the judgment of the dead is uniquely Egyptian in form and imagery, its central themes resonate across various world religions and philosophies. Christianity speaks of Judgment Day, where souls are evaluated for entry into heaven or hell. Islam includes the weighing of deeds on a scale on the Day of Judgment. Zoroastrianism has a bridge, Chinvat, that souls must cross, where their moral balance determines their fate. Greek mythology includes judges of the underworld who assign souls to the fields of Elysium or Tartarus. These parallels suggest a universal human preoccupation with justice after death, moral consequence, and the need for redemption. Modern legacy and cultural impact. Today, the judgment of the dead continues to fascinate both scholars and the general public. It appears in documentaries, museum exhibits, literature, and even pop culture, often dramatized, but still rooted in the awe-inspiring imagery of divine justice. It also invites modern reflection. If our lives were to be weighed today, how would we fare? What values do we live by? And how do our beliefs shape our behavior and legacy? By reflecting on the Egyptian judgment myth, we are reminded that our ancestors, though separated by millennia, grappled with the same existential questions we do. What happens after death, and how should we live to face it? The judgment of the dead in ancient Egyptian religion was a profound and deeply symbolic event that lay at the heart of their spiritual worldview. It was not just a mythic spectacle, but a theological and moral system that demanded truthfulness, justice, and purity in life. Through the dramatic ritual of weighing the heart against the feather of Marat, the Egyptians communicated a core belief that eternity was earned, not given, and that the soul's final reward or obliteration depended on moral integrity. In this sacred trial, they encoded their deepest hopes, fears, and values, leaving us not only a captivating vision of the afterlife, but also a timeless reminder of the importance of how we live before we die. The Book of the Dead wasn't just a collection of spells. It was a spiritual roadmap for the soul's journey beyond death, reflecting the hopes, fears, and beliefs of ancient Egypt. From magical protections to moral lessons, it offers a window into a civilization obsessed with the afterlife. As we leave behind the sands of time, remember that the ancient Egyptians believed death was just the beginning. If you enjoyed this dive into their sacred texts, like, comment, and subscribe for more ancient mysteries and forgotten histories. Until next time, may your heart be light and your journey eternal.